good evening. So, tonight's subject has been a long time coming. It's very fascinating. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to talk about and things to consider. And there's really a lot going on here when we talk about the subject of Bigfoot versus a Dogman. And it comes up from time to time. It comes up in live chats. It comes up in comments. And it's interesting. It really is. Everybody loves to see that kind of stuff. That's why we love to watch documentaries of, the lion chasing the gazelle or whatever, or the lion fighting over the gazelle and the crocodile comes up. We love that kind of stuff, and we love species interactions. And so there's a lot to talk about with this subject. If you're looking for a dramatization, a narrative, over a year ago, I did a video simply titled Bigfoot versus the Dogman, and there's a link in the description below. I highly suggest you check it out. It's a brief story. I actually just made it up off the top of my head. I sat and thought about how I thought it would go, and then I just started recording. And there's a link in the below to it. Go check it out. And at the end, I have a little bit of analyzation of what happened. I was trying something a little bit different. And at first, I was going to do a sequel to that story. I was going to, come up with another narrative and finish it off. And I still might someday. But there's just so much to talk about here, so much to unpack, so much to consider. So let's jump into it. And first and foremost, a lot of my knowledge, some of it comes from personal experience, spending time in the woods, which I want to spend more and more time in the woods. I want to spend more time researching. But, we all have lives. I live in a big city and I have a family and a lot of things going on, and it's hard to get away. So I listen to a lot of encounters. I listen to 2 or 3 different podcasts that mainly cover a lot of encounters. I listen to other channels, colleagues of mine, other people who also research and are very much into these topics, hear what they have to say. Also, some of the more professional people like Meldrum and, some of the more well-known Bigfoot enthusiasts. Hate to call anybody an expert because there are none. And the big-time names, they'll never talk about this. You even ask them about Dogman and they kind of get a chuckle and say, well, yeah, people are seeing something. And then you look at like the BDRP, the Bigfoot Dogman Research Project. You look at other stories online. You look at other researchers. And this is a subject that comes up now and then. But I will say, out of the thousands of encounters I've read, thousands of encounters I've heard in podcast forms, both Bigfoot and Dogman encounters, separately, because with Vic Cundiff doing his show and Sasquatch Chronicles and Dixie Cryptid and a lot of other just stuff online, and I do acknowledge that you'll find some lesser-known YouTubers and some other people out there that I think they have very true, real Bigfoot and Dogman encounters, and I think there's a lot of fiction, and I think there's a story that's been embellished quite a bit, and I think some people tell their stories get embellished. But that being said, out of the thousands of encounters I've heard, listened to, talked to in person, I've had quite a few of them sent to me, heard over the years, Dogman and Bigfoot, and some other strange creatures. Very, very rarely do you ever hear about these two creatures meeting or interacting. Now, obviously, that's to say that I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it happens all the time. But you rarely hear it, and to be honest, it's one of those, like, you want to be on a hillside like 200 yards away with a really nice spotting scope watching it. You don't want to be at ground zero for these things. So we have to look at other things because there are a few stories. I've heard a couple here and there of interactions of them. I've heard of Bigfoot's ducking and hiding from Dogman. I've heard a few stories of Dogman chasing down Bigfoots. I've also heard of Bigfoots going after Dogman individually. I've heard. So let's stop and talk about natural creatures for a minute and see if we can get any ideas or knowledges out of that and see if we can apply that to the situation. So, personally, I have seen black bears numerous times in person and been very, very close to them. I've also seen grizzly bears at, 25, 30 yards away and farther away. I've seen mountain lions very close up at several occasions. I've seen coyotes very close up on a whole bunch of occasions. I've never seen wolves. I've been to Yellowstone. multiple times in their wolf territory and never seen one in person or observed them. But I have watched a lot of documentaries and done a lot of reading on all sorts of different predators and carnivores and species interaction, and it's quite fascinating. Now, I think the huge caveat to this is I think Bigfoot, especially, and Dogman as well, as fantastical as these creatures are, there's something very real, very flesh and blood. They seem to be very intelligent. I think they're far more intelligent than a bear or a mountain lion. As intelligent or smart and as cunning as these animals can be, and I know wolves can be very intelligent too. But I think it's fascinating. I watched a documentary a while back, and it was how in Yellowstone Park, the mountain lions are generally submissive to the wolves because the wolf packs are huge and strong. But outside of Yellowstone Park and more like areas of Idaho, the mountain lions, which physically get bigger because they don't have as much competition from bears as well, that they get bigger and they're dominant over the wolves, and the wolves packers are smaller. And I think that's important. You think a big cougar, 250 pound cougar versus 4 or 5 smaller wolves that are 70 or 80 pounds. That's a pretty formidable target if you're a wolf or to try to deal with. You mean you ever pick up a nasty 10-pound house cat that's all puffed up and clawed? Well, imagine that, 20 times bigger with huge teeth and huge claws and able to jump and leap. But when you get into Yellowstone National Park, the packs are so huge, 10, 15 wolves, and they're very large wolves there. They tend to be dominant. In fact, they'll scare off grizzly bears from carcasses. So it's very interesting when you look at interactions between grizzly bears and black bears, cougars and wolves, bobcats and coyotes. A lot of native traditions about bobcats and coyotes. And you even look at other bird species like eagles and hawks fighting over stuff. And it happens. Grizzly bears kill black bears. Mountain lions kill coyotes and wolves, and sometimes consume, sometimes don't, as a food source, out of defense. And, we all love to watch that stuff, like we were saying on the Discovery Channel. And it does happen. It is rare. And I think we can apply some of those thoughts here to how these two cryptozoological creatures, the Dogman and the Bigfoot, might go about fighting here and how it might happen. So let's size up our two adversaries. Let's start with the Dogman here. The North American Dogman, for lack of a better term, looks a lot like a werewolf. A lot of people report them all across the United States, even in desert regions and cold regions. You don't get too many reports of Canada and going back in the extreme cold areas where you still get Bigfoot reports. But you do, you get them far up north, like Michigan, like the famous Michigan Dogman. And are generally described as a large, upright walking canine with that kind of canine leg with the extended forepaw and the haunched legs, and usually described as thin waist, very broad shouldered, with large claws on their hands, very menacing appearance. Almost like, and this is another theory kind of off topic, almost like they're built more to terrorize and for fear and to be scary than they are to actually go out and kill things, because they have such huge teeth, such huge jaws. Some reports of Dogmen have ginormous heads, and there seems to be different varieties, different types, bigger ones, smaller ones. You hear ones 6 feet, 7 feet tall. The largest Dogman I've ever heard of is getting into the 9-foot range. You hear some anecdotal reports of 9 to 10 foot, and that's absolutely staggeringly huge. And you got to think all muscle, thin waist. They got to get, if it's 9 foot tall, it's got to be 500, 600, 700 pounds, something like that. Very huge. Reports of these things being incredibly fast, long, sharp teeth, just, perfect. And there are some really, really out there theories that they were engineered to be as scary and ferocious to take down even larger things. So, the Dogman, very formidable. I would say ferocious, tenacity, fast. They all score very high in those areas. Intelligence, there's a lot of stories of them trying to break into houses and manipulating their environment. You don't hear a lot of Dogman tool use or being super clever. So I would say they are fairly intelligent, but probably not on the level of a Bigfoot, not even close. So when it comes to Sasquatch, they have some major advantages over an individual dogman. And I think the most major one is size. I think that, and the upper range of a dogman being 8.5, 9 feet tall, and that being a great big giant gray alpha, and middle range for a Sasquatch is, even like Patty would be considered like a small Sasquatch at like 7.5 feet tall. And, even the females being 8 feet tall. I think even a female Sasquatch would be physically a really good match for an alpha male dogman, just saying in physical strength. Now, obviously, the dogman would have a lot of teeth and claws and ferocity and probably an agility factor. But I'm just saying, if we were like pushing stuff around, like pushing logs around, I think the Sasquatch, even the smaller ones, just have such huge strength. They're just impossibly large, huge chested, huge shoulder, giant arms, giant legs. Reports of Sasquatch running impossibly fast speeds, keeping up with cars at highway speeds, moving huge rocks and huge trees like they're nothing, throwing deer over their shoulder, you get reports of, and sprinting up a hillside like nothing's going on. So I think just pure physical strength, Sasquatch definitely has it. They aren't typically, till you get into some of the other varieties like Wendigos and Gugwees, some of the more rare types of Sasquatch people report. I think generally we're just going to stick to like a Patty type Bigfoot because they get very large and they're very common. But you could apply this to maybe more like a type 2, like the more southern varieties of Bigfoot that tend to look a little more chimpanzee-ish as opposed to a, one that looks a little more gorilla or human-like. But generally, they might have some canines and some flat teeth. Their teeth are built very much like humans, maybe a little bit more pronounced. You don't hear a lot of claws unless it is like a Wendigo or like a Gugwee variety. So they don't have a lot of natural like weapons built into them, but I think they more than make up for that with their intelligence. And there's lots of reports of Bigfoot throwing rocks, pushing trees over, snapping trees, using trees, primitive clubs, throwing sand, being able to maybe climb trees. I assume something built like a Bigfoot could climb a tree a lot easier than something built like a dog. Although, like when grizzly bears climb trees, they don't do it as well as black bears because they're a lot heavier. But still, I just think the general mix of agility, of strength, you got to think of like the mountain from the Game of Thrones. Just this, huge giant thing that's surprisingly fast and able to manipulate its environment, able to think tactically. Not that Dogman can't, but I envision a Dogman pack acting a lot like a wolf pack, where there's just going to be one big one trying to take it down, and the smaller ones jumping on and tearing apart, or chasing down and exhausting something, like you would see in a wolf pack. Versus the Bigfoot, they're ambush hunters from what we've heard and from what we've seen. They use claws, they can break necks, they snap things, they lie in wait, and they use this to a lot of their advantage. They use their intelligence and their size. But the big thing to consider with Dogman, which really makes them so deadly, is the pack mentality. You get clans of Bigfoot, a family unit. You get Alpha Daddy Bigfoot, Mama Bigfoot, and maybe a younger son, and maybe a younger daughter, or maybe a brother to the alpha, or maybe an uncle, or maybe its parents or something. You generally get family groups, 4, 5, 6, maybe Bigfoots at a time. But with Dogman packs, there are reports of 10, 15, 20 dogs in a Dogman pack, and that would just be the ultimate spectacular show to watch. Maybe some almost full-grown younger Sasquatches and mom and daddy Sasquatch in their prime, like a good family unit, and hunting in a coordinated group or troop, versus a Dogman pack of 10 or 15 of them, all surrounding, the smaller ones coming in and nipping, the bigger ones coming in there doing power stuff. And I think a Bigfoot clan would get overwhelmed pretty dang fast by these Dogman creatures. Their teeth, their jaws would sink right into those huge, the huge trap muscles on their shoulders, would get into their their biceps, their triceps, would be able to bite them on the legs. I think if the Dogman was smart, they would try to disable hands and try to disable eyes and faces. Like most bears go for the face. A lot of predators go for the face because they know go for the eyes. And I think that would be one of the, but if you're talking one-on-one, if you take a huge alpha Dogman, 9 foot tall, 5, 6, 700 pounds versus an alpha Bigfoot, 10 or 11 feet tall, upwards of 1,000 pounds, and much more adapted anyway to pick up stones, to pick up rocks, probably more acrobatic stuff out of the Bigfoot, like, being able to pick up and throw the Dogman, break it over its knee, snap its neck, being able to throw it because they're way less reliant on claws and teeth, so they would have to be more creative in a physical combatant type scenario. So for me, with all things considered, if you're talking one-on-one, a full-grown alpha and of both, I would say that Bigfoot's probably going to win. I think they would come out of it really cut up. I think it would be like if a human, like a full muscular male, guy who works out, tough jiu-jitsu fighter, human, fighting off like a pit bull. People kill dogs with their bare hands, and dogs kill people all the time. Like, I'm a pretty big guy, and I can fight off a dog. Like, if a dog was attacking my family, I would fight it off no matter how big or scary it was. But I would probably need all these stitches and be torn up and have all sorts of gross infections and stuff like that. But I would do it motivation. I'm a lot smarter than an actual dog. I can pick up sticks and clubs and rocks and use a knife or whatever I can. And I think Bigfoot would do that. So it's kind of like when you look at when you look at how human beings are formed, we're the dominant species on this planet, although most wild animals could take us no problem. It comes from our ingenuity. But that being said, there's a pack of dogmen. Maybe the smell of blood is in the air. I could totally see, a lone Bigfoot, or maybe a couple of small family unit of Bigfoot, mom, dad, and a baby, and maybe they kill a deer or they killed an elk or something like that, and a pack of 7 or 8 dogmen are approaching and they see him coming, they're going to hightail it out of there. It ain't worth it. Or maybe there's a newborn and dad and mom got it. There's a newborn Sasquatch and dad and mom got to fight off the Dogman to get to him. If it's a lone Dogman like people see sometimes, so people often see Dogman by themselves. Then I also think that the Dogman would probably be if there's deer, if there's feral pigs, if there's humans around, if there's other things going on, why would they go mess with a Sasquatch? I think at the same time it would be like a pack of wolves seeing a lone grizzly bear. They're not just going to go over and poke the bear. So I think that in pack versus clan, even a larger clan of Bigfoots versus a moderate size pack of Dogmen, I think they would just get overwhelmed by teeth and claws and ferocity. I would have to give it to the Dogmen. But if it's individuals, I would have to say that the Bigfoot, even a moderately sized Bigfoot against even the largest Dogman, I think the Dogman would win sometimes, but I think the majority of the time, like if we were running like a simulation, I think the majority of the time the Sasquatch would win. They would be pretty tore up in the process and might die of an infection or bleed out. But who survives the fight and who doesn't immediately after, I would say the Bigfoot is probably going to be the winner. So if you like what you see here, please share it on social media. Please give it the thumbs up, hit the like button. Leave me a comment below. Let me know who you think would win. Let me know if you think I'm close or way off in my assessment. And, if you have any stories or if you've heard anybody or has an encounter of these two meeting and you think it's legit, not just one of the narrations floating around on YouTube, let me know. You can share it below, leave a link in the comment, and let me know what you guys think. Thank you very much, and stay safe in the woods.